Hello, everyone. Good day. Thanks for joining us. Sanchu Daimoku first. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. All right, going to cover a lot of ground today in this part 4 of the significance of the Lotus Sutra, perfect wisdom, perfection of wisdom. And I'm going to go a little further out because I have confidence in you going on my website and linking to Perfection of Wisdom and downloading that book for yourself. There are other aspect, like the Diamond Sutra is a little different. We went over that already. And also have the long version of Kanti's English translation of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Those are from the with the 4th period of teachings. Those are Nagarjuna's contribution. There's another sutra from that period as well. I'm not finding it right now. The Surangama Sutra. I'm also going to put a link to that book on my study resource site. Not really good at flipping pages here for some reason. Where is that Surangama Sutra? It's in the Wisdom period, the Wisdom Sutra period. Ah. You know how it is when you know where something is, but for some reason your eyes can't detect it? Anyway, because I want to expand, I really want this series of videos to capture the essence that's okay, that's enough time. It's from the 4th period of teachings, like the Perfection of Wisdom is. The reason I bring it up is because it was kind of late making it into China, but there's the name in case you couldn't understand my pronunciation, Surangama Sutra. It's a very important book. It's used a lot by Zen Buddhists. Its importance, as I have read it, and you can tell I read it because there's highlights all over the place. There are some quotes I'm going to read you out of it, because I want you to understand that all of this teaching of these different sutras are assumed knowledge by the time you get to the Lotus Sutra. So there's a lot of people in different groups and sects and temples that practice Lotus Sutra Buddhism, but they all pick and choose what, you know, there's some very enlightening. There's some very important passages in the Lotus Sutra, but a lot of the passages in the Lotus Sutra will zing right past you if you don't understand what they're in reference to. The Lotus Sutra doesn't spend a lot of time dissecting everything it says, like most of the previous sutras. So the overall effect is that if you're with a group that kind of shuns you practicing outside of the chant and the recitation, if you start bringing questions to meetings or whatever you call them in your group, and start asking questions about other sutras, very often it's shunned, and I'm amazed myself at the tendency of human beings to do that. I don't know if it's laziness or fear, or there's myriad reasons, I'm sure, but I want to be someone who encourages you to do as the Buddha instructed. As Shakyamuni told us, Nichiren told us too. So if you're in the Lotus Sutra, there's a long lineage of teachers, bodhisattvas, who constantly tell us to study broadly all of the Buddhist texts, all of the Buddhist commentaries, and non-Buddhist commentaries. Okay? So, I'm running a little low on juice, so I'm going to plug this in. Boy, it's just like you're in my home, isn't it? Anyway, Buddhism is full of very, very profound questions and answers. And so, in my videos, I like to be more casual because as life-altering as the teachings are, between us, we should be casual. We should be able to talk about this from any angle and have confidence, build confidence, actually, in what we're doing. So, for my part, I've posted a little chart of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo on my website. You can go download it there, just view it there. And what I've done is I've combined a few different aspects of it. So we're going to go into that right now, and after it, we'll get back to reading Sutra. Okay? So here it is. And because I can't read it on the monitor right here, I'll go to here. What you have at the top is the character Myo, and that long hook, which is what most teachers tell us to focus on while we chant, is the character Myo. Now that represents actually the Buddha mind, the 3,000 realms, Ichinen Sanzen, non-differentiation, quiescent energy, the Amala, or the ninth consciousness. And underneath it is Ho, which is the samsara mind. It's the mind that distinguishes and knows distinctions of objects and perceives them. It's part of the causal chain, the five aggregates, the start of rebirth, decay, and death, the place of cravings, attachments, samsaric identity, and the five senses, consciousnesses. Beneath that, Ren and Gay really talk about our life condition of discrete moments, our lifetime being moments, one after the other, perceived by us to be linear as a lifetime. Those are actually all cycles of deaths and rebirths, and at the bottom, Kyo is basically all of the teachings of Buddha. The start of the Noble Eightfold Path, the beginning of the Bodhisattva path, the realization of deep insight, cessation, liberation from cravings, quiescent mindfulness, complete understanding in this life with ninth Amala consciousness, Myo, which sends us right back up to the top. And this is why this is known as a circle teaching, a circular teaching. So what we are trying to do with all of the information at the bottom is to modify the stuff of the three characters in the middle so that we can access our actual, real mind, the mind of Myo. So I actually made a t-shirt that says, be the Myo, be the Myo. Got a big Myo character on it. Anyway, silliness, but I thought, whatever it takes to inspire us, right? So, take a look at that. It's online. Study it. If you have questions about it, by all means, I hope it motivates some questions. I'd like to further that dialogue with you. And with that modest interruption to this part 4, let's continue with the sutras. Again, this is why I'm doing this about the lotus, is that I'm trying to demonstrate how Kyo works. It's all of the teachings that brings us to Myo, to enlightenment. Okay? And with that, let's go back. All right. Let's continue. I want to see if this is going to continue now. Anyway, so, Surangama. Let me read you a couple of things that I think they'll jump out at you. The thing about this sutra is that it is into the minutiae of what it is to practice correct meditation, correct thought, correct focus, correct understanding while meditating. And like the Perfection of Wisdom, which has a lot more to offer than I read you, it's an in-depth study of what the Bodhisattva practice is in order to gain the door, if you will, to Myo, the Buddha mind. All right? And for instance here, this is near the beginning of the sutra. People who undertake a spiritual practice but who fail to realize the ultimate enlightenment, people such as the hearers of the teachings, learning or disciples, and the solitary sages, as well as celestial beings and others, Pratyeka Buddhas, and even Bodhisattvas, such as demon kings and members of the demons' retinues who follow wrong paths, all fail because they do not understand two fundamentals and are mistaken and confused in their practice. They are like someone who cooks sand hoping to prepare a delicious meal. Even if the sand were cooked for eons, numberless as motes of dust, no meal would result from it. People are born in a stupor and die in the midst of a dream. With nothing to do, they go looking for something to do. They fail to recognize their pure and fundamental nature and devote themselves to deluded thinking instead. They divide experiences into good and bad, right and wrong, but in the matrix of the Tathagata, the thus come one, there are no such distinctions. In the matrix of the thus come one, there isn't anything at all. It is absolutely pure. Our eyes may see the world of perceived objects, but they are simply manifestations of consciousness. When you really understand the truth that there isn't anything that comes into being and ceases to be, then you will understand that basically there isn't anything at all. But this principle is not easy to comprehend. We must come to understand its meaning gradually. And so I'm going to jump in right there because, again, this is an early teaching. Well, not very early, 4th period. But this is really about emptiness. And I'm going to caution you again because the tendency is to hear the word, there isn't anything, and think of nothingness. And this has happened in some sects of early Buddhism, Theravada, Nirvana, Hinayana, is the tendency to get nihilistic. You have to take the word apart. When Shakyamuni, when Buddha says there isn't anything at all, he's not saying there's nothing. He's saying there is not anything at all. Thing, phenomena, there isn't any of that. That's a perceptive game we're playing. That is the condition in samsara, the distorted lens through which our true awareness sees or is blocked from seeing and entertains these dreamlike things. Like in a dream, in a dream, some things are possible that we deem impossible in regular waking life. But our dreams are probably closer, a step closer anyway, to real perception, in that the borders we have in dreams, or the borders we have in waking life that we seem to not have in dreams, are just a little less strong than they are in our waking life. Our dream life is just the same mechanism as our waking life. We just have put more limitations on the waking life for whatever reason. I wrote a note on this rebirth cycle, moment to moment. Let me just read it. How can you take what moves? Now, this is kind of a scolding to the assembly. How can you take what moves to be your body and its environment, since they come into being and perish in every successive thought? I want to visualize this with you. I'm going to read on, but I'm going to come back to this because I think a visualization here would be helpful, albeit a visualization. You have lost track of your true nature, and instead you act out of delusion. Therefore, because you have lost touch with your mind's true nature by identifying yourself with the objects you perceive, you keep on being bound to the cycle of death and rebirth. Here the Buddha scolds the assembly. He tells them that they are unable to discern their own true awareness. They take their physical bodies and their body's environment to be real. They cling tenaciously to the body and mind, yet every thought of the conscious mind is subject to coming into being and perishing. One thought arises and perishes, and then the next thought arises and perishes. People concentrate their efforts exclusively on the realm of coming into being and perishing, and have no real understanding of the true nature of their awareness. Because you conduct yourselves in confused ways, your true nature and your mind do not work together, and thus you lose track of your true nature. You mistake external states for your real selves. You take that in of yours as yourself, in as like hotel, as yourself. You shouldn't think of that in as you. You take that in of yours as yourself. That would be to consider yourself a mere object. You create all kinds of attachments. You fail to see through things. You aren't clear about truth, and because of that, you cling to death and rebirth. If you weren't so confused, if you stopped mistaking a burglar for your own child by mistaking objects for yourself, you would be able to end death and rebirth. To end death and rebirth is easy. All you need to do is turn yourself around. If you go forward, you head right down the path of death and rebirth. If you turn around and go the other way, you end death and rebirth. It's not that difficult, but it's up to you to do it. You simply turn around. You turn your head and pivot your body. That's all that's needed. It is said the sea of suffering is boundless. A turn of the head is the other shore. Okay. A little bit more. They had engaged in confused activities at the gates of the 6 faculties and hadn't the least bit of skill with regard to their true natures. You need to understand that the mountains, the rivers, the vegetation, and all the rest of the myriad appearances on this earth are the Dharma body of the Buddhas, which neither comes into being nor perishes. You must recognize the pure, luminous, essential nature of everlasting true mind, and your mad distinction-making mind must cease. It is said the ceasing of the mad mind is full awakening. The mad mind's coming to a stop is the manifestation of our awakened mind. Because the mad mind exists and has not ceased, the awakened mind cannot come forth. The mad mind covers it over. The aim of this passage and every other passage of the sutra without exception is to reveal everyone's true mind. Made distinctions about what are in fact nothing but shadowy mental events. It's pretty. There's not much dancing around in this book. The whole book is an exposition in. Oh, by the way, I thought this might be helpful to you in your practice. So when we bow to the Buddha, we turn our palms up, and in this position we should contemplate that our 2 hands are under the Buddha's feet. This represents purity in the karma of the body. Because while showing respect in this way, we are not committing any offenses with the body. Placing our palms together represents purity in the karma of the mind. Placing the fingers together carefully side by side while placing our palms together represents single-minded respect or dedication to unite with the Buddha mind, myo. It means that your mind has returned to oneness and now gives undivided attention to revering the Buddha. Finally, Manjushri speaking to the Buddha represents purity in the karma of speech. He says, and it goes on. To the dust come one of the 10 directions, and the great Bodhisattva who dwell in samadhi, visual awareness and visible objects, and objects of mind as well, are like elaborate mirages that appear in space. They have no real existence of their own. Fundamentally, visual awareness and all its conditioned objects are the pure, wondrously understanding enlightenment itself. All right. I could just go on, but I want to get to the Lotus Sutra. So, I thought those were important passages because, there's a lot of sects that practice like this, and from the earliest teachings I found, there's a repetition always about how the palms are pressed together and the hands folded. This is the mind unity. This is prayer. This is expectation from somewhere else. That's not Buddhism. Buddhism is within. It's already here. We just need to open our mental eyes to it. I just read that very fact to you. Okay? So this is the proper position. Now, from what I've read so far and what you will take on as study in the Perfection of Wisdom in 32 chapters, as well as I encourage you to read the Surangama. At the time, they only talked about 8 consciousnesses, and in further, more evolved Mahayana, the Myo, the Buddha mind, is described as the 9th consciousness, the Alaya, I believe it is. And now I'm going to read some things out of the Lotus Sutra, albeit one translation, but they all agree. They just have slightly different interpretations of language. And I want to get back to the Lotus Sutra because this is what it's all about. Now, having just read that out of the Surangama, I was going to give you a visualization. Sorry. I thought about this morning. Discrete moments. The way we understand time in samsara. And I don't want to get into this too deep, simply because I might lose you guys. Not because you're not capable, but because I'm not capable with words yet to really go that far. I don't think. Maybe we'll end up there. But I want to start with this visualization because it kind of made sense to me. Dangerous as that might sound. So, being of, I'm just going to say it, karma, consciousness, the Buddha mind, the samsaric mind, they're all different states of energy. I've been talking a lot about these kind of things on Quora, where people, sorry, I'm got a problem with my neck, shoulder. And in order to understand karma, I've explained to people that karma are energies that come together, fall apart, and finally some set of them that come together start to have their own nature and agglomerate other energies until they become such an energy that it has within its environment an influence to combine or to fall apart. But if so many energies finally combine, they start to have their own nature, their own tendencies, and those tendencies react in their environment to combine with other tendencies until they amalgamate into something that actually wants to be, or I don't want, sounds like it has its own developed will, but at a very rudimentary stage, they attract other combinations and repel some combinations. That's kind of a primitive will, formative will, but it's not developed into real volition until there's enough agglomeration that there's a tendency within certain conditions to want to instantiate, to want to materialize. Remember, everything comes from energy. So when that starts to materialize, then it may associate itself differently with energies around it, and the process continues until there's so many energies that agglomerate that they manifest an instantiation of its energy. And that energy has like a kinetic to it, more than an actual volition. It has a kinetic. You know, once things, phenomena are in motion, they tend to stay in motion, and once they come to rest, they tend to stay at rest. Kinetics. And this kinetic energy, in combination with other kinetic energies, comes to a point where it has to instantiate as a materialized thing. Sometimes that thing is grass. Sometimes that thing is air. Sometimes that thing is consciousness. And if you start digging into all of that in Buddhism, the 5 skandhas, the 5 basic senses that we perceive as humans of touch, smell, sight, taste, and consciousness or mind, are all consciousnesses in Buddhism. They are doors of perception to which our basic nature, our true nature, can witness or perceive. This is where the break is between Myo and Ho. Okay? Everything in Ho then becomes the Renge. And the teachings, Kyo, help us to get back up to Myo. Alright? The visualization I wanted to give you is this: if you've ever been in a large auditorium like the high school gymnasium where there's either 1 or 2 or 4 basketball courts, just big box, and you walk in there with a well-inflated basketball and you heave it with all your might at the wall, and it bounces and it bounces and it hits another wall and it bounces another direction, but it's bouncing lower and lower with each bounce, and it might make it to the 3rd wall, it might not. If it does, it'll bounce again, and eventually it'll stop bouncing off of walls and it'll just start to bounce and slow down and then go into a roll, which can almost seem like it's speeding up. But that roll will eventually come to cease or rest. Okay? And this is what happens in the quiescent, what's called, I just read in the Surangama, Buddha actually called it ether, which used to be the word they used for what they're now calling dark energy, dark matter, because you can't see it. There was an idea that the whole universe was upheld by this ether, and the ether had properties that shaped the universe. Anyway, I'm just pointing out the language is not new. Ether existed a long, long time ago, perceived as an interim space, I believe, talking about the quiescent energy. This is the nature of something happening in the quiescent energy. This is the visualization now. An idea instantiates, like energy, a certain turbulence, if you will, in the energy, and it manifests for a moment into a thought, and that thought lends action, and that action starts, the ball bounces off, well, you threw it, but anyway, bounces off the wall and continues, and if it doesn't run into any other energies to support its behavior, it just sort of dies down and it's gone. Arises and dissipates. Now, if you had 5 of your friends go into that room and each one of you picked a wall and threw the ball up there, some of those balls might run into each other. Some might not. The ones that do run into each other are going to cause some crazy cacophony of instances that might then run into others, but eventually they're all going to quiesce and come to rest. But they're going to do things unexpected. Now, if 100 of you go into that room and do that, there's going to be so much activity that it's almost going to seem ceaseless. Now, we all know eventually everything's going to come to rest. But the picture is very different than it was from the initial one ball bouncing around. So I want to make that visualization for you so that you understand that energy does this. Energy can arise and just go away. Like waves in the ocean. It's still ocean, but there are waves in the ocean. Sometimes the waves just come into shore, crash, and then ebb back into the ocean, and they're no longer waves, they're just ocean. Some of them, sometimes in some parts of the world, you have different currents, and the waves align with other waves. And what happens then is a whole lot of activity where the waves are running into each other. Eventually, they just run into shore and run out. Some places in the world, you can go and the water runs down off of a higher slope much faster. We call it an undercurrent, and it goes out and crashes. It creates a wave of itself, really, and it crashes into the oncoming wave and makes it grow huge, right? The pipeline for you surfers, right? So this is the nature of energy, and we, well, I'm jumping. That energy that's arising and falling away is essentially moving will or kinetic energy. When it starts to coalesce, like a tsunami, it creates an enormous force to instantiate. That's what we are. We are a collection of countless billions of energies amalgamating into finally having a will, having an idea that wants to be, to exist. And those billions of thought ideas, thought moments, create all phenomena, not just humans, but all phenomena. So all phenomena are these amalgams of karma, which are tsunamis of the ocean and instantiate, but they're still the ocean. So this is like the Buddha mind. It's all a part of us, in us. We're of it, and we in samsara can, with visual awareness, consciousness, see what our karma has wrought, what it's brought out. Now, we can sit in our minds like a movie theater and look at all of this, be just amazed by all of it, and understand, that it's a movie and that we're seeing all these characters and players and things going on without becoming attached to them. However, that's not what we do. What we do is what movie makers call suspension of disbelief. Because if we were completely aware in a movie theater, we would see it as a movie, and it'd be entertaining. But when we get super involved in a movie, and we care about a character, and we feel when that guy, maybe bumps his knee on this corner of a desk, and we go, oh, and we sort of rub our knee for a moment, we've lost our suspension or our disbelief. We've fallen into our suspension of this belief. So in a very real way, we live our lives as human beings with a suspension of this belief. So we're totally admired in this grand play that we're in. And we've forgotten, as Shakyamuni pointed out to his assembly in the Surangama, that that's not us. We're totally in it. And if we want to stop grabbing our knee like we heard it, instead of just seeing it as a created image on a movie screen, we're going to suffer. So, in very simplistic terms, if you want to stop bumping your knee on a desk and suffering, realize who you really are. You're not the movie. Just watch it and release yourself from it. Go get popcorn. Okay, so that's my visualization. I hope there's something in that maybe turns on a light in a dimly lit room. And I'm going to get into into the Lotus Sutra here, because all of this preparatoriness in these first 3 videos was to get you accustomed to the idea that the information in the Lotus Sutra, although there's very important things in the Lotus Sutra, and it owns its place as the ultimate teaching, but it stands on the shoulders of all the previous teachings. So there's a lot of stuff that it's assumed you already know, like the Surangama, like the perfection of wisdom, on and on. Vimalakirti, Lankavatara, all these other sutras that you can read will then feed your practice, your understanding, your depth of knowledge about what it is you're actually trying to do. And then when you get to the Lotus Sutra, it's basically putting the lid on it and saying, okay, there's no more. This is it. Oh, by the way, there's a couple of things to really ground this into you, is that you all think I was born in this body and became Buddha, and here I am, I exist, and when I die, I'm gone. What you don't understand is that I've always been here. That I was born, and I became enlightened, and Buddha, granules of sand, blah, 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 on and on. You know how Buddhism describes things. It makes unfathomable numbers and immeasurable lengths of time for that reason, so that you stop trying to take it apart and just accept that my mind just can't get there. So, wow, that's a long time ago. Okay? But if I said, wow, that's a long time ago, you go, what, last year? 10 years? You'd still try to relate it to your movie, instead of understanding this goes way beyond movies. Okay, I've always been here. And what's he talking about? He's not talking about him, Siddhartha Gautama. He's talking about him being in the embodiment of Buddha mind, the true mind, the always been here, always will be here mind. So you don't have to look for me, the body. You have to look for me, the universal mind, the quiescent energy that is the basis of all things and non-things. Because things are where the movie comes from. Non-things are what we really are. Again, not nihilistically, but a force. It's ironic, but we call it life force, not we Buddhists, but all people talk about the life force. Well, what's a force? It's a display of energy, isn't it? So it's like we know this, but we refuse to know it. All right. So in the preacher chapter of the Lotus Sutra, he's talking to Vaishagyaraga. I have to take a minute to pronounce that right. And the Lord Buddha proceeds, well, Vaishagyaraga, all those bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, those are bodhisattvas that are at the pinnacle of their awakening. Mahasattvas, who in this assembly have heard, were it but a single stanza, a single verse or word, or who even by a single rising thought, one basketball. I hope that doesn't impede you now. Have joyfully accepted this sutra, to all of them by Shagyaraga. Among the 4 classes of my audience, I predict their destiny to be supreme and perfect enlightenment. I want to say something right there, but I'm going to keep reading this. And all whosoever by Shagyaraga, who, after the complete extinction of the Tathagata, shall hear this Dharma Pariyaya, and after hearing, were it put but a single stanza, joyfully accepted it, even with a single rising thought, to those also by Shagyaraga, I'm going to get this, be they young men or young ladies of good family, I predict their destiny to supreme and perfect enlightenment. Those young men or ladies of good family, by Shagyaraga, shall be worshippers of many 100,000 myriads of kotis of Buddhas. Those young men or ladies of good family, by Shagyaraga, shall have made a vow under 100,000s of myriads of kotis of Buddhas. They must be considered as being reborn amongst the people of Jambudvipa, out of compassion to all creatures. Those who shall take, read, make known, recite, copy, and after copying, always keep in memory, and from time to time regard, were it but a single stanza of this Dharma Pariyaya, who by that book shall feel veneration for the Tathagatas, treat them with respect due to masters, honor, revere, worship them, who shall worship that book with flowers, incense, perfume, garlands, ointments, powders, clothes, umbrellas, flags, banners, music, etc., and with acts of reverence, such as bowing and joining hands, in short, by Shagyaraga, any young men or young ladies of good family who shall keep or joyfully accept, were it but a single stanza of this Dharma Pariyaya, to all of them by Shagyaraga, I predict their being destined to supreme and perfect enlightenment. Now, other than arguing about what good family means, I think it just means having good habits. Certainly, by the time that you were accepting, reciting, keeping this sutra, your behavior has been modified. The thing I want to point out that I think is easy to miss is that when he makes this repeated statement, destined to supreme and perfect enlightenment, something should just ring out at you for a moment. Because every time in any sutra where you read that kind of language, there's always an additional, an add-on to that statement that says you will reach perfect supreme enlightenment in the next 10 lives, or in the next 10 millennia, or in your next life you'll this and then you'll get to this. There's always this discussion of future lives. And that's often mistaken for rebirth, which that's not what it is. But be that as may, I think it's very conspicuous that in the Lotus Sutra, he repeats this kind of exhortation constantly, because he's talking about the supreme and perfect enlightenment in this life. This is one of the really important aspects of the Lotus Sutra. It's not only the ultimate teaching, because with all of the previous teachings, he's gone into the minutiae of what proper meditative thought is, and what the purpose of it is, and what it looks like, and just takes it apart. In the Lotus Sutra, he goes, now I've described this enough. Now you need to know this is happening now. If you just do this, read, recite, keep, hold, things worship, be respectful and appreciate and loving of these, even if it's just one sentence in here that motivates you every day to meditate and practice, then you're going to be enlightened. Not going to someday, but in this life. It's guaranteed. That's, out of all the radical things that Shakyamuni said and did and changed in his day, that's the real kick in the pants. You don't have to live your life in a servile worshiping way. You may be worshiping, but know that accomplishes it now, in your life now. Because at any moment you can fully awaken to the movie. You don't have to die to get there. You don't have to live other lifetimes. You're dying and reborn every single moment. Every single thought is a moment that then perishes and renews to inform the next moment. And we, in the movie, what's a movie made of? Think about that. They're single-framed images that are flashing by your eyes at 24 per second, or 30 per second if you're in video. Those are still images. Those are moments. And just like those moments in a reel of film, so is your life. It's all of that karma, all of those, what's the word I used? All of that inertia of all those millions and millions of it. Look, there's something like 14 million, I don't want to say this wrong now. I think it's 14 million chromosomes in a strand, or in a, strand of DNA. You can check me on that, but the numbers are wild. And think about all of the energies that came together to make one of those chromosomes. Okay? That's a high-def movie. We're talking about billions of images transposing themselves from moment to moment. Of course they're going to change. They're going to change because our true mind is constantly at work interpolating, shuffling, reorganizing, dropping some, creating others. Right? So we're the director. We're the producer. Perfect word. Okay? So, but the point I'm making here is, who is Shakyamuni talking about in this chapter? The preacher, right? Who's the preacher? It's the Bodhisattva practice. The Bodhisattva is the preacher. Read, recite, and copy. And after copying, where does it? Those who shall take, read, make known. Make known. That's preaching. That's helping your fellow human. Let's go get a drink. Let's get out of this movie. Let's go see what's happening outside this movie. Let's go see the theater. Let's be observers of the observation, not stuck in it. Any Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Vaishagyarara, who after the complete extinction of the Tathagata, this is long after his extinction, after having put the robe of the Tathagata and occupying the pulpit of the Tathagata, and what is the abode of the Tathagata? Vaishagyararaga. It is the abiding in charity or kindness to all beings. That is the abode of the Tathagata, which the young man of good family has to enter. And what is the robe of the Tathagata? Vaishagyaraga. It is the apparel of sublime forbearance. That is the robe of the Tathagata. which a young man of good family has to put on. What is the pulpit of the Tathagata? It is the entering into the voidness or complete abstraction of all laws or things. That is the pulpit. Vaishagyaraga, on which the young man of good family has to sit in order to set forth this Dharma Pariyaya to the four classes of hearers. A bodhisattva ought to propound this Dharma Pariyaya with unshrinking mind before the face of the congregated bodhisattvas, the four classes of hearers who are striving for the vehicle of bodhisattvas, and I, staying in another world, Vaishagyaraga, will by means of fictitious creatures make the minds of the whole congregation favorably disposed to that young man of good family, and I will send fictitious monks, nuns, male and female lay devotees, in order to hear the sermon of the preacher, who are unable to gainsay or contradict him. If afterwards, let's see. Anyway, he's just saying that if you treat this practice correctly and you spread it, he will make conditions ripe for you to be able to do so. There was a woman, female nun, and this is another thing that the Lotus Sutra really drives home, although it exists in the other Mahayana, and this is one of the aspects of Mahayana that the Hinayana really don't like, because they love their misogyny. And I'm not trying to beat them up with it, I'm just saying that's the state of enlightenment they're in, and you know, to the degree that we can convert them to a larger thinking of Mahayana Buddhism, they're at least practicing. They have to be honored for that, and they're achieving great things. But you know, the danger of nihilism and misunderstanding, it makes me sad. I just, again, my mission has always been to see how I could, in my own small way, affect the world. And so I don't say these things about Hinayana as an insult, although I've read a lot in these sutras that really slam them. And so in a way I feel a certain amount of sadness. I don't like to use the word pity because that infers that somehow I'm better than them. But if I was going to use the word pity, it would be more in the sense of desperately wanting them to get past their own self-imposed limitation. But you know, it is Shakyamuni's teachings. It's just not complete. I'm going to get off of that. Anyway, so in that spirit, this woman, who's a nun, a leader of many nuns actually, she stands up and she says, you know, I haven't heard my name mentioned in all of these predictions of enlightenment. Ego. But anyway, that being, you know, Shakyamuni always taught to the capacity of the people he's talking to. So this is what he explains in the Lotus Sutra. He goes, it's not that I lied or you know, taught any falsehoods when I was teaching those earlier teachings, like the Hinayana and other middle sutras that were of different periods, you know, the 5 periods, including, you know, the 4th period with the Lankavatara to the Malakirti to the perfection of wisdom to the Surangama. It's just that he designed those teachings for the audience he had and the capacity of the audience he had, most of which were raised to that capacity by his earlier teachings. Okay? So this woman asked, you know, how come not us? Then the Lord addressed the noble matron Gautami, who is actually, you might recognize the name or similarity to Gautama. Gautami is the matron is his mother's sister, so it's relatives. Why dost thou stand so dejected, gazing up to the Tathagata? She replied, I have not been mentioned by the Tathagata, nor have I received from him a prediction of my destiny to supreme perfect enlightenment. So he responds, but Gautami, thou hast received a prediction of the prediction regarding the whole assembly. Indeed, Gautami, thou shalt from henceforward, before the face of 3,800,000 myriads of Codis of Buddhas, be a bodhisattva and preacher of the law. These 6,000 nuns, also partly perfected in discipline, partly not, shall along with others become bodhisattvas and preachers of the law before the face of Tathagatas. Afterwards, when thou shalt have completed the course of a bodhisattva, thou shalt become, under the name of Sarvastava Priyadarsana, i.e., lovely to see for all beings. Ooh, he's a player. A Tathagata, an Arhat, etc., endowed with science and conduct, etc., and that Tathagata, Sarvasatava Priyadarsana, O Gautami, shall give a prediction by regular succession to those 6,000 bodhisattvas concerning their destiny to supreme perfect enlightenment. So, there's a lot of inflection in this translation that comes from the English with the thous and the wherefores and all of that, but you get the picture. Again, this translation is from the late 1800s by H. Kern. I'm thankful to have it. This Matgursri is the second proper sphere of a Bodhisattva Mahasattva. The Bodhisattva who, undaunted and unabashed, wishes to set forth this sutra in the dreadful period hereafter. What dreadful period? He's talking about the fifth 500-year period after his nirvana, after his passing as a human. That's now. This is the era of greed, anger, and stupidity, right? Also, he refers to it more often as the era of the decline of the influence of the law. This is why it's so much more important that we dedicate ourselves not only to self-practice, but to practice for others, to help others join into this self-removal from the theater of life to the actuality of life, okay? We must keep to his, this is to the bodhisattvas of this time. He's saying, the bodhisattva who undaunted and unabashed wishes to set forth this sutra in the dreadful period hereafter must keep to his course of duty and proper sphere. He must be retired and pure, constantly avoid intercourse with kings and princes. He's talking about loose sexual morals. Nor should he keep up intercourse with the king's servant or with the Kandalas. There's a lot of corruption in his day with the use of sex just to divert people's minds. He ought not to court conceited men, but chastise such as keep to the practice. He must also avoid such monks as follow the precepts of the Arhat, of the Jainas, and immoral men. Again, there's that slam on the Hinayana, right? Because they can make you falter in your understanding of the full teachings. Bad influences, right? You've heard it all your life. Worst enemy can be your best friend because he knows the most about you, or she knows the most about you, can do you the most harm. He must be constant in avoiding a nun who is fond of banter and chatter. He must also avoid notoriously loose female lay devotees. He should shun any intercourse with such female lay devotees as seek their highest happiness in this transient world. This is called the proper conduct of a bodhisattva. So basically he's talking about any influences that can divert you from your bodhisattva path of Buddha mind, Buddha awareness. And he's got like, a whole bunch, another 25 things he's saying. So, further Manjushri, The Bodhisattva Mahasattva, who, after the complete extinction of the Tathagata at the end of time, the last period, the last 500 years, there it is, when the true law is in a state of decay, there that is going to propound this Dharmapariyaya, must be in a peaceful state of mind and preach the law whether he knows it by heart or has it in a book. In his sermon, he will not be too prone to carping at others, not blame other preaching friars, not speak scandal, nor propagate scandal. I hope I don't do that. He does not mention by name other monks, adherents of the vehicle of disciples, to propagate scandals. He cherishes even no hostile feelings against them, because he is in a peaceful state. All who come one after the other to hear the sermon he receives with benevolence and preaches the law to them without invidiousness. It's interesting that the video word is in there. He refrains from entering upon dispute, but if he is asked a question, he does not answer in a way to those who follow the vehicle of disciples. On the contrary, he answers as if he had attained Buddha knowledge. And on that occasion, the Lord uttered the following stanzas. I want you to see, though, that all of this stuff that I'm pointing out, this is all in the Lotus Sutra. But now that you have a reference to the earlier teachings, you can see much more deeply what he's talking about. When I first read this, it all made some sense, but it seemed awfully flowery. After studying tons more sutras in my over 30 years of doing this, now I read it and every word seems to be perfectly placed in a way. Not giving all credit to translation, I wonder how much more profound it would be if I had the capacity to read Pali and Sanskrit. But even so, his message is crystal clear. But only because I've read so many other sutras. As I said, when I first read the sutra, I saw some astounding things, but most of it kind of went over my head. And to be told by the people I was practicing that, this is all I had to do, don't look elsewhere, it just felt wrong. It felt contradictory. And my own mind needed more information. The monk who after my extinction shall preach in this way, without envy, shall not meet with trouble, impediment, grief, or despondency. I look forward to that. Nobody shall frighten him, beat or blame him. Never shall he be driven away, because he is firm in strength and forbearance. You know what? As I read that, and I in the back of my mind review, I've always been able to tell every few years, sometimes every year, how much my life has not just changed, because we change, but really evolved in my mind as to my attitudes about others. And I can really say that very, very few things frighten me. Whereas I always used to be looking for the other shoe to fall. So this is, I have actual proof in my life. It comes with practice and awareness. Because a lot of good things can happen to people and they continue to complain because they're not even aware of how, I don't want to say cliche, how good they have it, but, that's all very relative. But some people, man, no matter how much they gain in life, they just don't seem to see it. This is the chapter of Bodhisattvas from the Earth. In this version, it's issuing of Bodhisattvas from the gaps of the Earth. You can find that interesting. And I guess, you know what? I'm going to save this for the final. So everything we've been talking about so far has been provisional. And that's kind of a good ending point. because the next chapter I'm going to read, okay, that's the essential teaching. Chapter 16 for most of you in the Lotus Sutra, the Tathagata's lifetime, it's just full of meaning, but meaning that goes right over to your head if you don't have this other basis of understanding what he's talking about. That won't be as long a video, I don't think. But that's going to be the focus of the next one, and that's going to wrap up our discussion of the Lotus Sutra. Please comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what I missed. Let me know what else you'd like to know. Let me know if I made a mistake. Be prepared to back it up, though. And in the meantime, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I love all of you. Thank you so much. Hang in there. It's happening. You keep on watching these videos and studying, I guarantee you supreme and perfect enlightenment. How's that? I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.